It's almost funny that the day came when I, with my own hands, brought back the two torn pieces of red lace panties to return them to my husband's mistress, the woman sitting next to him, in the very meeting that was supposed to decide his career. When I walked into the glass-walled conference room, all 12 members of the executive board looked at me as if I were an alien. My husband, his face completely pale, stammered, his voice hoarse. "Please listen to me. It's not what you think." But before he could finish his sentence, his boss stood up and asked, "What's going on here?" That was when, on the big screen, the shameful video of my husband and his mistress started playing, leaving everyone in that boardroom with their mouths hanging open in shock. But before I tell you the full story, please hit the like button and comment below with the city you're watching from. I'll tell it all, right now. I am Evelyn Carter, 36 years old, financial manager at the Detroit Museum. My life had always been neat and precise, like the balance sheets I handled every day, until that morning when I happened to see, in my husband Gabriel's planner, a strange address hastily written down, accompanied by the note, 10 a.m., confidential. He said it was just a quick brainstorm session at Riverfront Renaissance Towers, the project headquarters he managed for Harborview Realty, but his company calendar showed no such meeting. I said nothing, only stood there silently, staring at the shirt he had just changed out of. It carried a faint scent of a woman's perfume mixed with cigar smoke. Not mine, and not anything he'd worn in the past 12 years. That night, as I was changing the bedsheets, I bent down and picked up something caught under the frame, a tiny piece of red lace that didn't belong to me. I stood still for a long time, not crying, not trembling, just feeling as if my body had detached from the room, watching everything from a distance, cold and clinical, as though this were a crime scene I had to analyze. Perhaps my profession had taught me how to notice the smallest anomalies, and for the first time in this marriage, I began documenting every detail as if it were a survival instinct. In my mind appeared two words: Phase 1, suspicion layer. The next morning, at the museum, while I was reviewing budget estimates for a new exhibition, Marlene, an older colleague, always quick to sense when something felt off, looked at me for a long moment, then gently asked, "Are you okay, Evelyn?" I just smiled. The kind of smile any woman who's ever been betrayed would recognize. A smile that tries to hold the body upright while the ground beneath it begins to crack. I started to trace back every pattern in Gabriel's behavior. Meetings not on his schedule, dinners he said were with clients, calls he ended the moment I walked into the room. All of them tiny, like dust. But enough dust can cloud the light of trust. And I am no longer the kind of woman who walks blindly past what feels wrong. Not anymore. That night, Gabriel went to bed early, while I sat alone in the small office at the corner of our home, warm yellow light falling across the worn pages of a journal my grandmother had left me. She once told me something that echoed in my head. The truth never disappears. It only waits to be seen. I closed the journal, opened my laptop, created a new folder, and named it Project Glassroom. A name I couldn't yet explain, but deep down, I felt that someday, the truth would surface in a place where light leaves no shadows. And I didn't know then that just a few days later, I would be standing in front of a glass room on the 14th floor of Harborview Realty, watching my marriage collapse, not with screaming, but with the silence of two people who've quietly realized their game is over. But to end things cleanly and fairly, I needed to see everything with my own eyes. So the next morning, while Detroit was still covered in a thin layer of mist over the red brick rooftops and the roads leading down to the river, I drove to the Hudson Collective, a high-end co-working space where startup founders, strategy consultants, and tech entrepreneurs buzzed in and out like a broken hive. That was the strange address in Gabriel's planner. The moment I stepped in, the scent of freshly roasted coffee and the clicking of keyboards filled the air with the kind of dynamism Gabriel always said didn't suit his work style. And yet, here he was. I walked up to the front desk, trying to keep my voice calm, and asked, "Could you tell me where Gabriel Carter's 10 a.m. meeting is?" The young receptionist looked at the check-in screen, then up at me with a casual cheerfulness that made my chest tighten slightly. "He's in a private meeting room on the third floor," she said, "with a red-haired woman." I stood still for half a second, not because I was surprised, but because that confirmation was the final key turning in the lock, snapping every theory in my head into sharp focus. I thanked her and went straight to the third floor, where thick green carpet along the hallway absorbed my footsteps, turning each movement soundless, as if the building itself wanted to help me see the truth without being seen. At the end of the hallway, the frosted glass door was slightly ajar. I pressed myself to the side, my heart beating with strange calm, and in that moment, they stepped out. Gabriel and her. Autumn. They walked so close to each other, they looked like two colors blending under golden light. Autumn, her wavy red hair glowing in the morning sun, leaned in and adjusted the button on Gabriel's shirt, with a gesture far too familiar, far too effortless for someone who was just a business partner. And he let her, didn't even step back an inch. I didn't gasp. I didn't tremble. I simply raised my phone, found the right angle, and recorded a 6-second video, followed by a rapid burst of photos. Their hands touching, glances exchanged, Autumn's hair brushing Gabriel's shoulder. Every detail was sharp, a stream of evidence I knew I would need. Then suddenly, like a puzzle piece falling into place, a memory flashed back. A few months ago, an anonymous message from a former Cleveland project contractor warning of a young female consultant who triggered a fraud investigation over inflated pricing. Back then, I didn't care. But now, standing in front of Autumn, that story locked into place with frightening precision. Autumn had once been involved in a financial scandal, and if she dragged Gabriel down into that same pit, then what was about to collapse wasn't just my marriage, but his career as well. I looked down and reviewed the video one more time. Clear. Undeniable. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the phone, and stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, the very place where I now knew the door to the truth had just opened. Once I stepped into the realm of truth, I knew I had to follow the numbers, because men can lie, but bank statements do not. That evening, when Gabriel said, "I have to work late at the office," and rushed out of the house with the urgency of someone running toward a new happiness, I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and logged into our shared bank account. 3 seconds later, a chill ran down my spine, like someone had opened a window and let the Detroit January wind blow straight through me. The days he was supposedly on a business trip in Grand Rapids matched perfectly with transactions at She-Wolf Detroit. The day he had an emergency meeting with the CEO, a receipt appeared from Grey Ghost, the place that once served our special date night tomahawk steak, and the week he claimed he was tired, didn't want to go out, just wanted to stay in. The statement showed a transaction at the Whitney, the most upscale fine dining restaurant in Detroit, reserved for only the most formal dates. I scrolled through each number, each timestamp, each transaction description. Not with pain anymore, but with clarity. When a woman has endured too much pain for too long, the truth can sometimes act as anesthesia. While he was pretending to be at work, I opened the Statements and Payments tab. A new PDF loaded. Hotel Shinola, Detroit. Room, King Deluxe. Guest, Gabriel Carter. Payment, secondary card from joint account. Number of guests. 2. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the words, 2 guests. No need for bedroom photos. One small number was enough to dismantle 12 years of marriage. But what made me want to laugh wasn't the room booking. It was the small receipt I found in his pants pocket while sorting laundry, a bill from LeBlanc and Company. Perfumery. The last line read, Joe Malone, Red Roses Cologne, purchased by Autumn Hale. I took the receipt to the store the next day at noon. Not to argue, just to confirm. The sales associate looked at it and smiled with professional ease. "Oh yes, Ms. Autumn is one of our regulars. She bought this last week. She even sampled 2 others, but eventually chose Red Roses, said he likes this one the most." He. I thanked her, placed the receipt back into my wallet like a final puzzle piece. As I stepped out of the store, the sun was shining down over Detroit's historic streets, the light catching the storefront glass, showing me my own reflection. Not as a betrayed wife, but as a woman preparing to enter a new phase of the game. That evening, I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and created a new folder on the desktop. The cursor blinked for a few seconds before I typed a name no one else yet knew. Project Glassroom. A plan. A preparation. A declaration of war without raising my voice. I didn't yet know how I would use all the evidence I had gathered. But I knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't see it coming. And to carry that out, I needed to understand my opponent, starting with the man who had slept beside me for 12 years. When Gabriel walked into the kitchen, removing his tie with the fake exhaustion I'd seen hundreds of times, I decided to try a small test. A simple one, light as a passing question, but enough to expose the reflex of a liar. I placed my glass on the table and asked gently, as if I had just remembered, "Hey, did you have a meeting this morning? 10 o'clock at Hudson Collective, right?" Gabriel didn't even take 2 seconds to reply. "Oh, yeah, it was with the architecture team. Long meeting, totally drained me." He said it while opening the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water, not once looking me in the eye. His voice was smooth enough that, if I hadn't had the video and receipts, I might have believed him. I just nodded, exactly the way he wanted. No questions, no raised brow, no sarcasm. I had no desire to get angry anymore, because anger now would only cost me my advantage. All I thought was, keep going, keep lying. The more you lie, the stronger I get. After dinner, I took my laptop into the study, closed the door, and called Renee, my best friend from college, now a civil attorney in Detroit. The moment I reached the second detail, her voice dropped low. "Evelyn, don't confront him yet. Gather everything. Let him roam free. Cheating men are always confident to the point of stupidity." I let out a soft laugh. A laugh not of joy, but of clarity. Renee began guiding me through every step. How to store evidence legally, how to verify financial transactions, and most importantly, never let emotions lead the way. Before hanging up, she said something I'd never forget. "You don't need to chase to catch him. A man digging his own grave will fall right in. Your job is to stand there and turn on the light." That night, Detroit was so quiet I could hear the old radiator clicking beneath the wooden floor. Gabriel turned off the bedroom light early, but his phone kept lighting up. Messages, calls, soft vibrations. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need to. I simply opened the voice memo app on mine, placed it beside the bedroom door, right where every whisper, every rushed hallway call could be heard clearly. And for the first time in months of uncertainty, I felt I had stepped out of the darkness into the light. Not the light of heartbreak, but the light of control. From that moment on, I was no longer the betrayed wife. I became the one building the plan. And that plan began to reveal its darkest layer the very next morning. Gabriel woke up unusually early, barely making eye contact. He tied his shoes in a hurry and muttered, "I have to be at the riverfront site early. There's an issue with the plans," before slamming the door shut. His tone didn't carry the rhythm of someone going to work. It carried the tension of someone fleeing before suspicion could catch up. I stood alone in the quiet bedroom, morning light filtering through the curtains, and began searching for the Kendra Scott earring I thought I had dropped the night before. I knelt by the nightstand, reached into the narrow gap between the cabinet and the wall, sweeping through the dust. My fingers touched something soft. Soft, but tough. I pulled it out. 2 pieces of black lace lingerie. 1 pair of panties, torn in half. Not mine, and a completely different color from the red lace I had found under the bed. I stood frozen. Not from shock, but because this confirmed every suspicion in the most brutal, unmistakable way. I held the fabric up, morning light exposing the tear at the exact spot only rushed, heated, and illicit encounters could leave behind. Part of me wanted to throw them away, but I knew this wasn't just clothing. This was evidence. And two different colors of lace, two incidents, two locations in my own home. This wasn't forgotten by accident. This was frequency. This wasn't a single act of betrayal. This was a schedule. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands. My financial background trained me to view evidence not with emotion, but with the logic of an internal audit. I grabbed a Ziploc bag, gently placed both pieces inside, sealed it, stood up, looked around the bedroom. Suddenly, I realized something. Autumn wasn't careless. A woman bold enough to sleep with someone's husband in their own home isn't someone who leaves clues out of stupidity, unless she meant to, unless it was a power play, unless they had done it here so many times they no longer remembered what they'd left behind. That thought sent a chill through me, and with it, a new question arose in my mind. If they're confident enough to leave evidence out in the open, how confident are they in what they've hidden? I scanned the room, opened drawers, checked Gabriel's desk, nothing out of place. But my instincts nagged at me, the same feeling I get when discovering discrepancies in a financial report. Something was hidden in the most perfect place, the place no one would ever look. That thought made me turn toward Gabriel's study, the safe, a place he assumed I would never touch, because I respect privacy. His mistake was thinking privacy and finance are separate worlds. I entered the study, stood before the black safe, its metallic chill giving me goosebumps. I placed my hand on the keypad. Our wedding anniversary. Just as I predicted, the door clicked open. Inside, tucked between tax documents and insurance files, was a thick navy blue folder. I pulled it out, opened the first page. Kickback agreement. 7% vendor adjustment fee. Estimated payout, $12 million. Vendor reference submitted by Autumn Hale. The air in the room thickened. I sank into Gabriel's office chair, flipping page after page, each one colder than the last. Kickbacks, illegal commissions, abuse of position, inflated pricing for a public project, and the one executing it all alongside him, his mistress. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Riverfront project material prices doubled. Check appendix contract. Someone's pocketing money. I stared at that text for a long time. Long enough to understand Gabriel's betrayal was never just in bed. Deeper, filthier, far more dangerous. This was financial crime at the project level, the kind that could end his career and drag his company into audit and investigation. I sat back down, opened my laptop, my hands lighter than ever. I clicked the desktop folder and renamed it. Phase 3, Financial Fraud Layer. No more suspicion, no more marriage, no more emotion. From now on, I was exposing two criminals, and the game, from this point forward, had completely changed. When I closed the folder labeled Phase 3, Financial Fraud Layer, I knew I'd gone too far to turn back. There were only two options left: let them destroy my life, or destroy their plan before they could. I chose the second. That night, as the old radiator clicked beneath the wooden floor, I sat alone in front of my laptop, the desk lamp casting a soft glow over the two pieces of black and red lace sealed in a Ziploc bag beside a $12 million kickback contract. I opened Gabriel's calendar, reviewing every entry, and that's when I saw it. 9 a.m., executive boardroom, final approval meeting. Tomorrow. The most important meeting of his career. If the project was approved, Gabriel would be promoted to executive project director, and Autumn would become a senior consultant for Harborview Realty. They would become Detroit's new power couple. And me? In their eyes, just a museum wife. Gentle, oblivious, someone who spent her life labeling artifacts, far too easy to fool. I let out a quiet laugh. Not bitter, but the kind of laugh that comes when you finally realize that the strongest weapon isn't rage, but strategic silence. I reviewed all the evidence neatly laid out on my screen. The kickback agreement PDF, the 6-second video at Hudson Collective, photos of them holding hands, transaction statements from She-Wolf, Grey Ghost, the Whitney, the Shinola Hotel invoice, the anonymous tip about inflated pricing, the perfume receipt bought by Autumn, the 2 pieces of lingerie in the Ziploc bag. I organized everything into 4 categories and labeled them clearly. Layer 1, behavioral evidence. Layer 2, financial transactions. Layer 3, physical items. Layer 4, corporate fraud documents. No lawyer could look at it and not smell crime. I printed 1 set for legal, 1 for HR. 1 went into my handbag. I didn't know if I was the calmest or the most terrifying woman in Detroit that night. Maybe both. Around 9 p.m., my phone lit up with a message from Gabriel. Working late at the office. Need to prep documents for tomorrow's leadership review. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. But I'd learned from the past few days. Men who lie text like they're reading from a script. I opened the Family Locator app, the one he installed himself 2 years ago. So you'll feel safe when I travel. It took 3 seconds for the map to show his location. Not the Harborview office, not the riverfront site, but a luxury complex in Midtown Detroit. I zoomed in. The building name appeared clearly. The Lafayette Residences. Autumn's apartment. I stared at the blinking blue dot, my husband, pretending to be hard at work for the company's future, while in reality, he was inside his mistress's apartment, probably preparing documents in a different way. I didn't get angry. I just quietly added a new line to my documentation folder. Layer 1.4, location data. Gabriel present at Autumn's residence while claiming to work late. When the evidence starts handing itself to you, you know, tomorrow they'll have no way out. Close to midnight, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. For the first time in weeks, I saw myself. Not tired, not fragile, not like someone betrayed. I looked. Focused, clear, and dangerous in the safest way. For me. Tomorrow they'll think they're walking into a meeting to launch the next chapter of their careers. But they don't know the first person to walk into that boardroom will be me. And I'm not coming to cry or beg for an explanation. I'm coming to end it. I shut the laptop, packed the printed evidence into my bag, and whispered into the dark room, "It's time." I decided I would appear at the exact moment they couldn't run. The moment when their silence would speak louder than any lie they had ever told. That night, I slept exactly 4 hours. Not out of worry, but because my mind was too sharp to allow emotion to seep in. As dawn broke, Detroit lay under a light mist over its towering buildings, and I knew today would be the day the 2 of them lost everything they thought was in their grasp. I dressed in a pale gray suit, tied my hair neatly, and placed the USB and prepared documents into my handbag. Every detail had to be perfect. A betrayed woman might tremble, but a woman holding the truth never does. At exactly 10 a.m., I stepped out of the elevator on the 14th floor of Harborview Realty headquarters. A long hallway lined with deep green carpet led to the executive boardroom, its walls made entirely of glass overlooking the Detroit River. No blind spots, nowhere to hide. I stood just outside the glass wall, like standing before a stage where I was about to pull the final curtain. Inside, Gabriel and Autumn sat next to each other. Autumn leaned in, whispering something into his ear, her smile faint and confident, as if she belonged there. Her hand rested on his thigh, gentle, familiar, and utterly certain. I watched them as if watching actors in a play, unaware that the real audience was standing just outside the door. Gabriel adjusted his tie, face full of anticipation, like a man about to receive a promotion, a raise, a new reign of power. I could guess exactly what he was thinking. Evelyn knows nothing. Autumn did great. Everything's safe. A few seconds later, the CEO entered, a seasoned man who had seen too many scandals in real estate to believe in anyone's perfection. He placed documents on the table, looked around, and asked in a voice calm enough to chill bone, Before we move forward, any conflicts of interest we should know. The room instantly thickened. Autumn pulled her hand back, a reflex so quick no one noticed. Except me. Gabriel looked straight at the CEO, mouth ready to deliver his thousandth lie. But he didn't get the chance, because that was my cue. I took a deep breath, placed my hand on the glass door handle. The timing had to be perfect, not too early to seem hysterical, not too late to give them time to recover. Just as Gabriel opened his mouth, I pushed the door. A soft click echoed through the spacious room, turning all 12 heads toward me. It took only 1 second for them to realize I wasn't staff, not a guest, not someone who'd wandered in by mistake. I walked in, each step deliberate, steady, as though I'd rehearsed it 100 times. My eyes met Gabriel's first, and I saw it, the panic igniting so fast, his face turned pale in a single breath. Autumn went white as ash, her fingers gripping the table edge until they drained of color. And me, I simply smiled gently, placed my handbag on the table, and prepared to unveil the truth they had worked so hard to bury for months. I walked into the room as if stepping into a space I had been preparing for weeks. The sunlight pouring through the windows, reflecting off the polished wood floor, casting a sharp gleam over Gabriel, sitting frozen, and Autumn stiff as a statue caught mid-act. I didn't need to greet anyone. I didn't need permission. I simply, quietly, unzipped my handbag and set it down on the meeting table among stacks of important project documents that the 12 company executives had been reviewing moments before. The quiet snap of the zipper broke through the silence, so crisp I could hear Gabriel swallow. I took out a transparent Ziploc bag. Inside were 2 pieces of red lace lingerie, folded neatly like professional evidence. I placed it in the center of the table. Dead center, where all eyes were already drawn. No explanation, no raised voice. The silence in the room felt like the second before a building implodes. Tense, dense, and irreversible. Autumn reacted first. She flinched like she'd been electrocuted, her hand jerking back from Gabriel's thigh like she'd touched live fire. Her perfectly made-up face drained of color, her lips quivering slightly. She looked at Gabriel, as if hoping he'd find a way to fix this. But Gabriel had no color left in his face. His entire expression was ghostly, his eyes wide with a tremble that reached into his pupils. Evelyn, he stammered, voice hoarse. Please, it's not what you think. I turned to him, not angry, not hurt, just the absolute peace of someone who knew they were standing in the right place at the exact right moment. The more Gabriel panicked, the more he knew I wasn't the type to walk into a boardroom of 12 executives unless I had everything in place. The CEO, who had silently observed me from the start, finally leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. His gaze showed no surprise. Perhaps he'd already suspected. Veteran leaders always sense scandal before it arrives. He looked at the Ziploc bag, then at Gabriel and Autumn. His voice was steel. Explain, now. Neither of them could say a word. No explanation. No sound strong enough to crack through the truth now laid bare in the gleaming glass boardroom. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to plead. I only needed to stand there and let the evidence speak for me. And just as predicted, their silence became the greatest confession of all. The CEO didn't even need 3 seconds to decide. He pushed back his chair, stood up, his voice cold and sharp. This meeting is over. No one dared to argue. No one dared to leave their seat. The air in the glass-walled room on the 14th floor thickened like cement setting into stone. I opened my bag and took out the small silver USB. Tiny, but enough to turn the fate of 2 lives upside down. I placed it in front of the legal department's representative. He received the USB as one would take a lit fuse that could destroy the whole department if mishandled. He looked at the CEO. The CEO nodded. And that was when everything began to collapse. Literally. Legal approached the projection table and inserted the USB into a laptop connected to the big screen. A soft beep sounded. Then the folder, Project Glassroom, appeared on the 65-inch screen. Bright, cold, indisputable. He opened the first file. Photos of Gabriel and Autumn holding hands at Hudson Collective. The room murmured. Then the 6-second video played. Autumn leaning over to button Gabriel's shirt with an intimacy no business partner could explain. One senior executive at the far end of the table muttered, "Unbelievable." Next, legal opened the restaurant statements. She-Wolf, Grey Ghost, The Whitney, all matching the dates of his business trips. Beside me, someone whispered, "Misuse of corporate funds?" Another replied, "No, this is clearly corporate funds misuse." Then came the Hotel Shinola invoice, a double room, 2 guests. A voice exclaimed, "Jesus Christ!" I looked at Gabriel. He was unraveling with each file opened. But the heaviest blow came when legal opened the kickback agreement, 7% vendor adjustment fee, estimated payout, $12 million. The room fell silent. A high-ranking executive spoke in a gravelly voice. "Autumn listed as vendor? This is felony level." Autumn froze, her face drained of color. Finally, legal opened the GPS location file from last night, showing Gabriel present at Autumn's apartment at the exact time he texted me that he was working late at the office preparing material for tomorrow's leadership meeting. Voices erupted. No one maintained neutrality. He betrayed both his wife and the company. We can't allow someone like him to lead a $100 million project. This company will be under audit if we proceed. Gabriel tried to speak. "This is just a misunderstanding, Evelyn," but the CEO waved him off, cutting him short. "There is nothing left to misunderstand." HR stood up, voice ice cold. "Gabriel Carter, please hand over your badge and laptop." Gabriel opened his backpack in despair. His laptop was placed on the table like Exhibit 57 in a major criminal case. His badge, once a symbol of pride, now held by HR as the sign of his career's end. Security entered, quiet but uncompromising. Autumn gasped when legal received a new email. Autumn Hale. Previous vendor fraud investigation in Ohio. Everything she tried to hide unfolded publicly, like an open film. The CEO looked at Autumn. "Your consulting contract is terminated immediately." Autumn trembled, tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Security approached her, gently, but leaving no choice but to leave the room. Gabriel watched the scene, his face ashen, realizing it was his turn. I stood silently, said nothing. I didn't need to. They completed the rest themselves. When the final door slammed shut, the boardroom returned to silence. Cold as steel. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of a legal process beginning officially. I picked up my bag and walked out. I did not destroy them. I only turned on the light where they tried to hide the truth. And that light began to spread like a silent explosion, triggering a cascade of upheavals throughout the entire system. Just 48 hours after the Glassroom meeting, the legal department sent an official email to the entire executive board. Preliminary internal investigation findings. Fraud. Conflict of interest. Breach of corporate ethics and compliance. 3 simple lines. But enough to bury the career of a man who once thought he was irreplaceable. Gabriel received his termination notice first thing Monday morning. Under Michigan real estate regulations, involvement in kickback schemes meant his industry license was revoked permanently. No title. No project management authority. No legal right to continue in the profession. He went from a man on the brink of a major promotion to an example for disciplinary hearings, a textbook case showing that power always carries consequences. As for Autumn, the company sent a notice canceling all consultancy contracts within 24 hours. Partners who once praised her skills quickly withdrew their collaborations. The Ohio fraud case file reopened. and an internal memo circulated among consultancies. Autumn Hale, do not engage. Blacklisted for vendor fraud risk. Her name vanished from consultant rosters, from the Redwood Project, from 3 major pitches in Chicago and Cleveland. A disappearance so swift, it was as if she had never existed. Detroit, a city always full of stories in bars, hair salons, and office corridors, began to whisper. In Midtown, people spoke of a red-haired consultant, collapsing right in the boardroom. Downtown, they spoke of a project manager ousted for kickback scandal. No one knew all the details, but Detroit had never been short of imagination. Among the dozens of messages I received, one came from a contractor who once worked with Gabriel. Thank you for standing up. Without you, we'd still be forced to sign those overpriced contracts. I stared at that message for a long time. Not out of pride, not out of desire to respond, but because it reminded me that what I did wasn't just to protect myself. I had unintentionally protected many who were trapped in the whirlpool of corruption, but dared not speak out. I didn't reply. I simply saved it in a separate folder named People I Helped Without Knowing. Then I closed my phone, rose, walked to the window, and looked down at Detroit, the city of steel, of tears, and of truths that never sleep. The storm had exploded, but its aftermath was only just beginning. And one of the residuals was the final duty I owed myself, putting an end to this marriage once and for all. The next morning, I went to the office of Renee, my best friend, now my divorce lawyer. The room was small but bright, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and the familiar rustle of papers from divorce cases she handled every day. Renee looked at me, her eyes serious but kind. Are you ready? I nodded. Without hesitation, I filed for divorce, not because of the 14th floor meeting, not because of the lace piece or the kickback contract, but because I realized the man I once loved chose to betray me before I discovered the truth. Renee laid out the terms we had prepared for weeks. I keep the house in Indian Village. I keep all savings under my name and the majority of retirement funds. Gabriel is not allowed to touch any asset I earned from my museum work. She said, You don't take anything from him. You only keep what belongs to you. I smiled softly. Perhaps that was the most just thing I had ever done for myself. When Renee submitted the papers to the court, Gabriel appeared at her office, his eyes red, face hollow, as if he had just lost everything, and indeed he had. Evelyn, he stammered, voice choked, give me another chance? I was wrong. I lost my way. I still love you. His voice cracked as someone desperately clutching the last thing left in life. But what he didn't understand was love couldn't save a person who didn't know how to keep it. I looked at him for a long time, and for the first time in many months, I felt no anger, no pain, only a simple truth. I can't move forward if I stay beside him. No, Gabriel, I said calmly. I'm not wavering anymore. He broke down crying, not for me, but for himself and everything he burned to the ground. I turned away, not out of cruelty, but because I knew if I looked back, I'd see the old man I once loved standing there. And I didn't need that memory anymore. At the end of the day, I returned to our silent home, so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. I opened my laptop, looked at the folder that had accompanied me throughout this journey, Project Glassroom. I opened it one last time, scanning every file, every piece of evidence, every receipt, every video, everything that helped me see my life clearly. Then I moved the mouse to the bottom right corner of the screen. Click. Close. My hand did not shake. I felt no regret. I only knew one thing. The next chapter of my life would begin from the freedom I had just signed for myself. And Detroit, the city that once pulsed at the heart of my life, suddenly became quieter than ever, as if it were silently seeing me off without judgment. My last day at the Detroit Museum unfolded as quietly as a windless winter afternoon. No long speeches, no roaring applause, just a few close colleagues hugging me tightly And Marlene, holding my hand a little longer, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, you've lived up to your strength. Go now and build the life you deserve." I smiled. No tears. In fact, for the first time in a long time, I felt there was nothing left tying me here. My phone buzzed just as I stepped out the museum doors. An email confirming a job offer from a contemporary art museum in Boston. They said they were impressed by my risk management skills and the internal fraud report I wrote for the Detroit Museum. I laughed. A light laugh, like a passing breeze. Who would have thought that the most painful months of my life would become the foundation for a new professional chapter? That evening, I returned home and posted the listing to sell my house in Indian Village. Just a single simple line. 3-bedroom home. Loved, but ready for a new chapter. I began packing, only keeping the things that truly belonged to me, not the things that reminded me of a marriage long since decayed. I placed in a small box the 3 final items I could never part with. The silver necklace my grandmother gave me when I was 13. Her journal filled with handwritten advice for me, the most stubborn granddaughter in the family. The deep purple wool scarf she knitted for me the winter she passed. Everything else I boxed, labeled, and stacked in neat piles. And strangely, with each sealed box, I felt a little lighter, as though I were quietly shedding layers of old dust that had clung to my soul for years. That night, looking at the rows of cardboard boxes lining the hallway, I knew that Detroit, with all its chaos and the raw truth it forced me to face, had finally returned to silence. It no longer held me. It no longer hurt me. It was simply a city that had fulfilled its role in my life. 1 week later, I drove my old SUV down the long roads leading to Massachusetts to begin a new chapter in Boston. A new city, new opportunities, and a place where I could rebuild a life with no trace of Gabriel. I chose a 2-bedroom house with a backyard in a quiet suburb south of Boston. Small, white walls, gray roof, a fenced yard, and a blazing red maple tree that would glow in autumn. Though it meant a 1-hour and 20-minute commute to the museum, I didn't mind. I wanted peace. A place with no footsteps but my own. A place where calm didn't require permission. The day I moved in, Boston skies were clear, and the ocean breeze carried a salty scent through the air, one that made me feel like I was being quietly reborn. I placed my grandmother's silver necklace and her journal on the wooden shelf by the entrance, as a spiritual marking of this new space. And then, I did something I had wanted to do for years. I adopted a retired canine named Rex. Rex was 9 years old. His black and gray coat and steel-sharp eyes softened with an odd, quiet gentleness whenever he looked at me. He had once served in a search and rescue unit, resilient, loyal, and with a past no one really knew, just like me. I had suggested adopting a dog many times, but Gabriel always refused with the same line. "I'm allergic to pet hair." Now, I didn't have to care about anyone's allergies but my own. Rex entered the new house like he'd lived there his whole life. He sniffed every corner, then lay down beside the kitchen mat, lifting his head to look at me with a serenity that made me laugh out loud. In the days that followed, I relearned the rhythm of a woman who didn't need to care for anyone but herself. I learned to cook dinner for one without feeling lonely. I made a schedule for Rex's baths, brushing, and morning walks. I played jazz through my old speaker, letting the little kitchen glow like a peaceful cafe made just for me. One afternoon, as I brought Rex to the local vet, the doctor looked at him and smiled. "This dog chose well. He picked the right person to protect." I chuckled and gently stroked Rex's head. I didn't disagree. I didn't deny it. Boston slowly became the place where I could finally breathe fully again. Mornings with Rex running through the backyard, afternoons with sunlight pouring onto the windowsill, evenings with small, quiet meals, and soft jazz in the kitchen. And just as I thought the past had finally come to a full stop, my phone rang. Gabriel. His name appeared on the screen, so unfamiliar that it took me a moment to remember how I used to wait for these calls. I picked up, not out of hope, but to close a door I had never fully shut. His voice was hoarse, urgent, desperate. I've lost everything. You win. I stood by the window, watching the red maple leaves flutter in the breeze. How ironic. I never once thought of this as winning. I had only escaped him. I don't play games of winning or losing, I said, my voice calm as still water. You destroyed your life yourself. I heard him sob quietly on the other end, a sound of a man who only mourned himself, not me. I said nothing more. I ended the call, gently, without trembling, like placing a piece of paper on a desk. A few days later, an email from Autumn landed in my inbox. The subject line had just 3 words. I'm sorry. In the message, she wrote that she'd been deceived too, that Gabriel made her promises, that she didn't know about the fraud beforehand. She tried to paint herself as a victim, as if that erased the nights they tore apart my marriage. I read it all, not angry, not sad, just tired. I replied with a single line. Take responsibility for your actions. Then I hit block. Not out of hatred, but because I had no reason to keep people who chose darkness in my life anymore. When the door had closed, I whispered to myself, the old ones have disappeared, and to disappear, they had to leave me first. One afternoon, I stood before the living room window of my little house on the outskirts of Boston, watching the city lights flicker on like artificial stars scattered across the earth. The sea breeze drifted through the white curtains, bringing with it the salt of the ocean, a scent that made me feel like I was being reborn, piece by piece. Rex lay curled at my feet, his head resting on the chair leg as if he knew today was a special day. A day when I would place the final period on a long journey full of pain, quiet, and awakening. I opened my laptop. On the screen, the familiar folder appeared. Project Glassroom. The folder that had stayed with me through the heaviest days, where I stored every piece of evidence, every lie, every shard of truth. It was the life raft that kept me from drowning, and the sharp blade that severed a rotting marriage. I clicked it open, scanned through each file one last time, then moved the cursor to the top right corner and clicked close. No trembling, no hesitation, no regret. I opened a new file and named it Chapter 1, A New Life. The file name lit up like a small sprout breaking through old dead soil. I leaned my head against the window, watching Boston shift in color outside, and smiled. A smile I thought I'd lost long ago. That glass room didn't end my life. It only lit the path I was meant to take next. And with that smile, I closed one journey, to begin another, brighter, cleaner, and fully my own. If this journey made you feel a little less alone, or reminded you that any woman can rise again after being broken, please hit like. And if you want to keep walking with me, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next story will strike deep in the hearts of many women out there. It's the story of a wife who finds out her husband is cheating, not with a stranger, but with her own sister